Good morning. It is Friday. Welcome to the Friday Grief Chat with Jill and Deb. I am glad you are here. Deb is not here today because she's off doing some learning of her own, which is something we really value here at the Friday Grief Chat and on Humor, Grace, and Grief on Facebook. So she will be back next week and she will be bringing a special guest. We're going to have Aina Spirit Walker, who's going to be talking about boxing with grief. She does box breathing, which is also called square breathing. She works in EFT. She does a number of other really cool things. I have posted in the chat her page that you can find her. She is that page is IENA spiritwalker.com. So if you want to look at her ahead of time, that would be awesome. We also have another special guest coming up. I'm hoping it's going to be the second week in October. And that is someone I was just put in touch with, and we've been talking back and forth. And he does contact with pets after death. He's got an amazing array of books he's written. He's really approachable. He's been on lots and lots of podcasts, and he liked what he saw about humor, grace, and grief, and the Friday Grief Chat. So we will be hopefully welcoming him in just a couple of weeks. Whew. So those are the announcements. It's Jill. We got cool guests coming, and today we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart. Because, as all of you should know by now, I am a social worker, and social workers love their people. And part of my people are folks who are midlife to aging. I know we call it elders and we call it gerontology here in this country, which sounds so clinical and so not welcoming. And to quote Joe Muirhead, so not sexy. And it is, in fact, a population that A, I'm part of, and B, many of you are part of, and C, all of us will eventually be part of. So let's not make it a negative or a stay away from. Let's make it something we talk about. Let's include ourselves in it. Let's look at those that we know and love, or know and maybe tolerate, who are in that population. And let's talk about what grief and aging looks like, because it can look very different from, say, the group online that's called Sexy Young Widows, or the folks who have lost partners or children. This is grief with aging, and aging has its very own kind of accommodations that we go through. And I was really lucky last week. No, this week. It's been a long week, folks. This week, I was really lucky to be on a symposium for the Future Proofing Healthcare Professionals page. And we had experts on elder care, which is the term used in Australia and Great Britain. We had a social worker who'd been doing the work I do for 10 more years than I have. Woohoo, I'm not the oldest one. And he has organized all kinds of interdisciplinary work with folks to keep our elder and midlife population more engaged and increasing quality of life, which is something we all want, right? We don't want to just say, "Oh, well, they are relegated to living at home quietly or being placed, and then they can play bingo." And we also had a physiotherapist from Australia who works on helping folks figure out how to be safe at home or where they are, and how to figure out how to improve the way their body works as their body is changing. And then we had a psychologist who teaches the facilities where people live how to engage and how to not relegate people, how to keep them relevant, how to listen to what their lives have been. It was really an active hour. We were tumbling all over ourselves, over talking each other, because everyone had things to say. And that led really easily to the topic of grief for that population, or my population, because when you are aging, you are having losses on the regular, are you not? How many of you who are watching have seen that or have experienced some of those losses as we age? And aging means over the age of, oh, I don't know, 52, right? Now, I was working in a high school last year, and I had a kid look at me and say, you know, I really have a hard time understanding older people. And I said, what is an older person? She said, oh, anyone over 40. I thought, oh my God, I'm old enough to be the grandmother of someone over 40. I'm really a super senior to this kid. So there are lots of accommodations in terms of just how people see you. Part of that conversation we had at the symposium this week was we don't need to have the music and the activities that used to exist in some of the aging care facilities. I mean, bingo, it's okay when things are locked down and you're in COVID. And, some music that's still relevant. But, by the time we get there, we're going to need some rock and roll, and we're going to need some, we'll have Bonnie Raitt playing. We will have all of the music we came up with. It's not what people think. Right? We need to have pools in these facilities so that people can swim instead of staying inside, and get outside and get some sunshine. It's adapting over time to the loss of some forms of independence. Sometimes it's adapting over time to needing forms of assistance, not, oh, little honey, let me help you cross the street. Do you know somebody did that to me? Just a couple of months ago. Let me just walk you across the street to make sure you're safe. Seriously? First of all, I'm big enough to stop a truck. I will do more damage to your car than you will do to me. Second, I use a cane. And if you come barreling toward me, that cane's going to go up in the air and remind you that your windshield is not going to stay intact. And C, it's going to remind you that there's somebody in front of you. So back off. Don't call me little lady. Probably not even when I am a little lady, if I ever get to that point. Don't call me that. I have a name. I might even respond to ma'am, but not little lady. I don't think so. So we've got adaptations we have to do over time. We have things we use to get ourselves where we need to go. Sometimes we earn those handy blue tags for parking because things don't work as well as they need to. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Did you know there was a congressional hearing yesterday about adaptations and making accommodations for folks with disabilities and seniors? A congressional hearing. John Fetterman was there testifying. I think he was wearing shorts too. There's an accommodation. And he whipped out his phone and showed the app that he uses now because of his stroke, which occurred in his 50s, that caused him to have an auditory processing deficit. It's something that he has to use even still. And he talked about how much people picked on him. Colleagues picked on him. Right? News media picked on him because he didn't speak quickly enough. He understood what was going on. His brain had to have time to process and adapt it. And he uses an adaptive technique on his phone so that he can process and keep up with conversations and get back to conversations if he gets lost in them. It doesn't mean he's not functional. It means he's alternatively functional. That is a loss in midlife. And the responses he gets are losses in midlife. But you know what the bigger loss is? I'll bet none of you knew that hearing was going on. I'll bet almost nobody in the United States knew that hearing was going on. Not one news channel covered it. Not one. Okay, so we have a little problem with the funding bill right now. I get that. But that was an important hearing. And it was covering a topic that's vital to all of us eventually. Whether it's for your parents now, or for you now, or for your kiddo if you've got a kid with special needs. Adaptability, accommodation, that kind of stuff is always relevant. And not one channel covered it. The Wall Street Journal definitely didn't cover it. Now, I do have a news feed that's not normal because my news feed covers death, grieving, loss, dementia, disability, pet loss, spirituality. It covers all the things. And so I get weird, odd little bits from little news feeds that normally don't show up other places. But we really have to look for that stuff. That should have been something everybody heard about because everybody has somebody who is aging, and everybody has somebody who has a disability or will have a disability, or you will have a disability. Because 1 in 8 of us is going to have dementia symptoms by the time we're 65. And 1 in 10 of us is going to be using some kind of device by the time we're 65. It is not rare, folks. It is common. And when I was watching Fetterman show off his phone app, I kept thinking, how many of my people that I work with online, I do Zoom appointments with them, can't manage an app. So if there are apps for grief, or there are apps for disability, there are apps for aging, they have no hope of accessing them because the phone screen is too small. They have to find the app in the phone. And, trying to find an app in a phone, first you got to put the password in, then you got to get through the whole back stuff. And then, how many apps do you have on that phone? How do you find it? I have to use keywords to find some of my apps. And I use my phone for everything, all the time, everywhere. But I struggle to find those suckers sometimes. And so does my daughter, so I don't feel so bad. We need to be able to look at how we support folks who are experiencing these ongoing losses as they age in ways that don't demean them or set up even more barriers. For a lot of folks who are aging, myself included, the bigger screen is easier. I got my Costco ad yesterday. I was so excited. I love HP computers. I have an Envy. That's what I'm on right now. It's not an ad for them. They don't pay us. But the new Envy came out and it's back to the 17 screen. I'll be able to see everything. It's easier to cope with bigger things when your eyes are changing, which is also one of the losses of aging. Our eyes change. And if someone's got dementia, you lose your peripheral vision. That's why people with dementia tend to fall. That's why they have trouble processing, because they're not getting all the information. They're getting the information right in front of them, not around them, not below them. So there's an adaptation for aging. If you've got someone who's showing any signs of dementia or vision loss, get rid of the throw rugs. They become fall rugs. They're not helpful. They don't see them, so it's not about it being attractive. It's just dangerous. And move the dog water close to a wall where they don't walk. Because rugs and dog water, that's where people break their legs and hips, in case you didn't know. That's your friendly social work tip of the day. Aren't you glad you're here? Right? So when we're talking about aging and aging in place and loss and grief, what do we do to prepare ourselves? And what do we do to support those around us? That was another thing we talked about in that conversation on Tuesday. And that's because when people do this for a living, they have all the ideas, and 1 hour is not nearly enough. So you're getting sort of the tail end of that. And for those in Australia, I'm sorry you aren't able to be here because it's middle of the night there right now. And it's also Saturday. What do we do to prepare ourselves, and what do we do to offer support? I got a call last night from one of my employees who is going to be doing be part of a panel for a pink ribbon program for women with breast cancer. Sorry, coffee necessary. Didn't want to cough. And she called. She said, "I'm so excited. I'm taking your book with me. I finally sat down and read it." I'm like, "Yeah, it's been here for 4 years. You've had plenty of time to read it." But she said it talks about all the dying and the loss, and it's so easy to read, and it just makes sense, and it's like a step by step. And I said that was the intention, yes. And she said, and then one of the people who's on the panel is a doctor. And somebody on the panel said, should we even bring up that people might not survive illness and that we need to talk about preparing for end of life and death and grief? And she's our employee. We train our peeps. Of course we should. If someone survives, great. Then they're ready for when this ever happens, because there's no way out of this life except through death, and there will always be grief, and grief is part of life. And that is why I'm the grief talker. But she was all in on, if we don't prepare people, including the caregivers, for what might happen, then they get caught up short and they don't have time. They don't get to say the things. They don't get to say goodbye. They don't realize while they're adapting that their world is changing. They're not taking notes about it. They're not taking the pictures to remember the things. They aren't prepared. So what do we do to prepare? Well, first of all, we got to talk. And I know that we say this all the time on this show, but we got to talk. Next time, we're going to talk about breathing and how to get through grief by square breathing. But we have to talk about the things. We have to talk about how to say goodbye. We have to talk about what's changing. We have to talk about, no, you can't drive anymore. It's not safe. We have to talk about, we probably need to change the phone so that it makes more sense to you. We need to talk about that remote control is ridiculous. And let me make it simpler for you, because the generation that we're talking about didn't grow up with remote controls. I didn't even grow up with remote controls. They happened after I became an adult. We had channels that you changed. That's what we call it, changing channels. You turned the dial, and there were only 13 of them. And there wasn't YouTube TV. And now this program goes out on YouTube. Right? So we have to talk so we can help those who are experiencing these losses adapt to them. We need to talk about what we are seeing, and not in a cruel way. Don't do what they did to John Fetterman. Do the, I'm observing that there's some shift in what you're doing or how you're handling or how things are going around here. Can I offer a couple of suggestions, and can we work on some ideas? That's a way to do it. We need to talk. We need to talk about what people want at end of life. We need to talk about what they don't want at end of life. We need to talk about all the things that need to be said so that you're not trying to say them after that person has died. It's a lot nicer to say them while they're still here. Maybe we need to talk about having a wake or a party ahead of time and invite everybody, and everyone gets to say the things. As someone is aging, instead of doing a 90th birthday, how about a 70th when there's still more people here? We have a beloved woman in our church who just turned 90. And I was at her birthday party, and there were a lot of people there, but a lot of her peers were no longer there. That's the kind of thing that we need to talk about. We volunteer at Project Food at our office, which is a program in downtown Riverside that feeds the hungry and the homeless every Wednesday night. And there's a free medical clinic there too. And the two people who've been running that clinic and Project Food since it started are the same age as my mom, who just died. Literally the same age. And they're just now getting ready to hand everything over. And I was sort of taken aback, but Dick and Donna, you've been doing this. It's not going to feel like it's the same place without you here. And they said, we still have some time left. We need to go do some things. I'm like, nobody should have had to tell me that. I didn't need to put my grief on them. I needed to process it over here. But we do need to say the things. So what they need to hear is thank you for all you've done for so many thousands of people. And we will take it from here. And that's what our elders and our midlives need to hear. When it's time for someone to retire, we need to celebrate that it's time for them to retire and go do some things and help them find those things and help them not feel like we can't live without them, but also not feel like their contributions didn't matter, because they did, and they do, and they'll go on, but they deserve their time, right? We need to talk about plans for grief as well. And you know what the number one plan for grief is? It's listening. It's having someone tell their story. The social worker who was on the program on Tuesday said the thing that has transformed the practices of his students is to speak to people who are in the aging process and to say, you know, what matters to you? Tell me what matters to you. Tell me what your life represents. Tell me where you've been. Tell me your story. And we know storytelling is a powerful tool in grief, but it's a powerful tool in anticipatory grief and in ongoing losses with aging. And it's also a powerful tool in making those who are aging relevant to the current conversation. They are not just people to leave at home. COVID did some damage with that. COVID made everybody go home because our elders were the most at risk. And you can argue with me if you want, but that's my story. I'm sticking to it about COVID. But it did some damage because it grew that thought process that when someone who is older, and that's air quotes, dies, well, they had lived a long life, so that's okay. No, they weren't supposed to die from COVID. They had more years left. And if someone is experiencing disabilities or aging process that's limiting their world, that doesn't mean we let them just limit it down to nobody sees them. That means we find ways to make them relevant and to bring their world to our world because they have things to share. They have places they've been. They've had experiences that nobody in these generations are going to have. Let me tell you a story about a patient I had in hospice years ago. I won't use names. I won't use specifics enough to identify. But when I walked into the facility where this woman lived, the staff there said, oh, don't go back there or get ready to duck. She throws things. And I looked at the paperwork I had and I said, it doesn't say she has dementia of any sort or mental health issues. No, she's just angry and she throws things. She won't let you in. Okay, throw down accepted. Here I go. And yeah, she threw some things. And it took a while. And it took persistence. And it took me asking about her story until she was really sure I meant that I wanted to hear it. It took me figuring out that her pillow hurt her neck and back because it was one of those stupid little fluff pillows. And she needed a gel pillow that didn't get too hot. And it was her birthday, so guess what she got? And she was in a bed near a window, but her bed didn't face the window. She couldn't see outside. And the view was mountains covered in snow. It was spectacular. And she loved roses. And so I got a rose bush and we planted it outside her window. And she got to see it flower one season before she died. She was 99. And then she finally told her story. She had lived every chapter of American history in the 20th century. She had grown up on a farm where they grew their own food. She left for the big city, went to Washington, D.C., She worked in the Works Progress Administration during the Depression and spent her lunch hours giving out apples to starving workers who were waiting in line for benefits or to try and get a job. She married and they moved to Hawaii because he was in the Navy. Let's think about that. Depression to Hawaii, Navy, 1940s. Yes, she was walking her husband to work on December 7th, 1941. And he told her to run because those weren't our airplanes. And he ran toward the water and she ran toward the gym. And she spent that day pulling people into the gym and treating wounds. And he spent the day rescuing people from water that was on fire. She was a witness to that. And then they were transferred back to Washington, D.C., and she became a secretary for the McCarthy hearings. She witnessed that. Eventually, she retired. He died early. She found the joy of Disney when it opened. It was like talking to Forrest Gump. It was amazing. It was a story. I will never forget her. I will never forget her pink rose bush. I will never forget hearing about what it was like to see those planes coming over the horizon. And when I was at Pearl Harbor, you better believe I remembered that. That's the kind of thing that preparing someone for aging and sitting with them and listening, that helps them with their grief about their life eventually closing out. And it sends their story with you so that you can then share it. Because now all of you know the story of someone walking her husband to work as a young newlywed in Honolulu and seeing planes come over the horizon and hearing the bombs and giving people apples on the streets of Washington, D.C. and walking into Disneyland the very first day it opened. That's in fact why she stayed in California when he died, because she had Disneyland. And she died an hour from Disneyland. That is what telling the story can mean. And that is what listening does. We can listen and we can bring in interdisciplinary help and get the supports needed instead of letting people be ignored or shunted. We can go with folks to doctor's appointments and intercede if doctors are not listening or not paying attention, which does happen. And that's not a diss on doctors. You're busy. I get it. You have lots to do and too many patients and not enough time. We live in an area that's short of doctors. That's why we have a free medical clinic on Wednesday nights. But when you are that senior sitting in an exam room and you're trying to say something hurts and they're saying, well, that's just part of being older, you're not being heard. And that's a loss. And you as a support person can intervene and make that life better. You can say, how about PT? How about some kind of adaptive equipment? How about something other than Tylenol? Right? What do you have up your sleeve, doc? What can we do? If this was your mom, what would you want to do? And then you can listen on the way back and let that person vent or let go of that experience and come up with a plan that puts them in charge of their care and support them. That is what grief and aging is about. It's adapting, it's being heard, it's telling your story, it's leaving your story behind, which allows those who love you to grieve you afterward in a much healthier way. And it's giving better quality of life in the process, which is certainly something everybody deserves. I hope this has been helpful today. I hope that you will join us next week when we talk about box breathing, which is something I absolutely love, and EFT, which is something I absolutely do, and that you will also be back in the following weeks, that you'll be here for our contact with pets after death, that you will be here when we talk about another guest topic, which is going to be planning end of life and making choices for yourself for your end of life in an active way. And we've got a few other guests up our sleeve after that, too, because we're all about it. I would like to make sure that I wish all of you who are Jewish a peaceful Yom Kippur as we go into this coming Monday and Tuesday, and that your Sukkot is fun the following Friday night. I will understand why you wouldn't be here that Friday if that is a holiday that you stay off of social media. And I would like to welcome Deb back next week because certainly we're all missing her. Have a great week, everybody. Remember to take care of yourselves. Remember to tell your own story. Remember to share the stories of those that you love. And remember that even when we're grieving, we can smile and we can enjoy the autumn air. I hope you've got some. I know Northern California is smoky right now. And that you can enjoy the changing of the seasons if you're lucky enough to have them. Take care, everybody. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.